flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia, duly called and held on the 10th day of March 2014 at 7:30 p.m. in the Trustees' Room, 2nd floor, Village Hall, Fredonia, New York, and public notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given to the news media and conspicuously posted in one or more designated public locations in accordance to Section 104 of the Open Meetings Law. I'd like to start this meeting with a proclamation. Whereas the name Joseph Russo has been synonymous with the care and compassion of the sick and the infirmed, and whereas Joseph was a great believer in giving back to the community with his fundraising efforts to assist in the dialysis unit at Brooks Hospital, and whereas his funding in 2010 of the RO Foundation, a charitable foundation to assist patients and their families when dealing with unexpected travel expenses to hospitals and treatment centers, and whereas even his own path of health was weakening, he continued his selfless mission to help others, and whereas Joseph Russo was a friend in need to all who knew him, and whereas the family and friends of Joseph Russo did gather on Saturday, March 8th, 2014 to celebrate the life of Joseph Russo. Now, therefore, I, Stephen Keefe, with the power vested in me as the mayor of the Village of Fredonia, do hereby declare March 10th, 2014 to be Joseph Russo Day in Fredonia. Mr. Siri.
Whereas members of this board present at the meeting have read the official minutes of the Board of Trustees regular meeting of February 24th, 2014, and now therefore be it resolved, this board approves the minutes as entered in official minutes, and be it further resolved, the reading of the minutes be dispensed with.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Reports.
We have the Justice Report for the month of February. There was a total of $24,945 collected, of which $9,144 was parking tickets, $15,801 fines and surcharges, 135 vehicle and traffic, 51 criminals, 16 village ordinances, 1 civil case, for a total of 212 total cases.
Thank you. How about correspondence?
Correspondence was received from Trustee Misico, campaign manager of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, requesting the use of the village sidewalks for the Fredonia Walk MS on Sunday, May 18, 2014.
Be it resolved that request of Trustee Misico, campaign manager of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society, is hereby approved to hold a Fredonia MS walk on Sunday, May 18, 2014, using various sidewalks, subject to direction of the police department, and the village receiving a certificate of insurance in the amount of $1 million, naming the village an additional insured, which the village has received.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Passed.
Correspondence was received from the Secretary of the MM Fenner Hose Company to add the name of Ben Woods to the active rolls effective immediately.
Be it resolved, the name of Ben Woods, Maple Avenue, Fredonia is hereby added to the active rolls of the MM Fenner Hose Company effective immediately.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Ben, and welcome on board. Public portion. Now is the time for the public to speak, and I'd like to call on Mary Croxton to take the floor on behalf of the Complete Streets.
Stand over here. I'm Mary Croxton. I'm representing Bicycle Pedestrian Coalition, and I'm here to introduce the draft policy of Complete Streets. To answer a few questions, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I do want to start with a very short quote. I believe that the taming of the horse has resulted in the degeneracy of the human body and urge young people to walk for exercise. That was Thomas Jefferson. What would Thomas Jefferson think of the car? Things really haven't changed much. He was worried about our young people not getting exercise by walking, and our concerns are that our streets are safe for all kinds of users, and that's what Complete Streets is about. Whether it be a pedestrian, or a bicyclist, or someone who is young or disabled, and also safe for cars and transportation, trucks and buses and the like. I don't know that everybody got a chance to read this draft policy. There's actually, some people have submitted some things to me that are changes. There was a typo in it, and I, instead of guess, it would be, what was that? No, yeah, instead of quest, it would be guess. So, and we're thinking of using the word shall instead of should, because as you know, in certain parts of the complete streets policy, you know, there are situations where these kind of things can't be taken into, you know, account because of, you know, the say the money, the cost of it would be outweigh with the use. So there are things in the draft policy that account for not going by the policy. Some of our interests are obviously biking and walking, people with disabilities, education too. One project that we would like to have looked at is bike lanes on Central Avenue. That is basically a painting kind of thing. We were going to go into looking at how long Central Avenue is, but I didn't accomplish that task, just to see what kind of cost factors you might be looking at. Another thing is, you know, doing things like share the road signs, so that it reminds people that there are bicyclists and other forms of transportation beside the car and trucks. So we have some representation here. Does anybody else want to bring up any kind of significant issues here?
I'm Jack Croxton, and I support this policy partly because I just think it's important to try to promote more bicycling, more walking in the village. I think it has very important health consequences for people. So I think anything that we can do to make it easier to walk and to bicycle in the village has both short-term and long-term positive benefits for people in the village of Fredonia. And I promise Mary did not make me say that.
Yeah, right. I would like to compliment.
Yes, Sue Parker. Yeah, you need to stay.
Okay, then. I just wanted to ask you, my understanding of the Complete Streets is that part of the positive aspect of it is that it's not incredibly expensive, and what it's talking about is that changes kind of moving forward, any changes that are made match up with the Complete Streets, but it's not like you have to do this whole dramatic expensive thing, and is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Decision-making in the design process should routinely consider all users. And that means if some project were to come up, let's say, just for instance, Day Street, then something needed to be changed about Day Street, then all users need to be considered in that process. Where it's not that, you know, okay, all streets at this, you know, once this is adopted, all streets have to have bike lanes and sidewalks and things like that. It's when the changes need to be made, all users should be considered. So that's a really good point. That one project, you know, might be something. There are grants out there, some significant grants that I've been talking to some people about applying for them through a grant process, and some of these grants give us money for sidewalks. We'd like to see sidewalks put in when it's feasible, and bike lanes, that kind of thing. So grants will also be a part of it. It isn't necessarily that once a project comes up, hopefully there will be some grants that are available. too.
Some of these grants would not be available if the plan would not adopt it, right?
Yes, that's true, yeah.
I mean, you have to have this
Good
in
point.
place before you can apply
Right.
for some of those grants.
Correct. Anybody have any questions?
I just have a comment. My name is Tim Ferriggs, and I also strongly support this policy. And I know from our discussions that this policy has already been successfully implemented and modeled. I know in particularly Minnesota.
Silver Creek,
and
Jamestown, Buffalo. There are a number of communities in the area that have adopted this. This policy, this was with the help of Chautauqua Health, and we took this policy from some of the better policies that have been done. We didn't reinvent the wheel with this, and just changed some of the verbiage. And there's some other verbiage that I would like to change as well. But yes, great. Thank you.
I'd just like to mention that not only is this very practical for everybody, but I looked up complete streets on the internet and looked at pictures of the places where they've done it. Gee, they're beautiful.
There's some wonderful design models that you can see if you look up complete streets that have happened and you know, making places safer for all users. Steve, did you? Thank you.
My name is Steve Reese, and I'm not a resident of Fredonia. I'm a resident of Dunkirk, but I have the same interest in the Complete Streets process that Barry has brought to you folks. In addition to those features that the Complete Streets program have already been mentioned, in addition to those, I think one of the very attractive elements of it is that communities that have a Complete Streets program tend to be very attractive to people who are looking for a place to move a company, places for people to come as tourists. It suggests to outsiders that there is an appreciation of cyclists, pedestrians, the care and feeding of the same. And it is true that some money would need to be expended, but as my friend Dick Gilman has suggested, in many cases, unless you have a Complete Streets policy, there are funding agencies who will not consider your grant application unless you have the Complete Streets policy in hand. In addition to those attractive features, areas that have implemented Complete Streets programs have seen a significant decrease in traffic accidents involving both pedestrians, cyclists, and automobiles, given the calming effect that a Complete Streets program can have in terms of how traffic moves through particular intersections. And I think we all know that Central Avenue can become a racetrack quite often, and a Complete Streets program would have a tendency to calm that traffic down, slow it down, cause everyone who's involved in movement on those streets to pay more attention to what they're doing, resulting ultimately in fewer accidents, less harm to both tourists and residents of the community. So I hadn't really anticipated speaking here tonight, but thank you for your time.
I was at a meeting once where Steve was at a Dunkirk revitalization meeting, and there's, you know, thoughts about making a bike trail all the way to Lake Erie. I don't know whether that's going, you know, on Central Avenue, but that's kind of a vision that some people have.
I was Christina Jervis. I live on Central Avenue, and I just wanted to reinforce the point about safety that was brought up. As a mother of two young boys and a dog walker, I can't tell you how many times that we've almost been hit by a bicyclist because they're using the sidewalks instead of a bike lane. So I really wanted to highlight the safety issue, and I also just wanted to mention, I'm on the sustainability committee at SUNY Fredonia, and I raised the issue there. And although there are some restrictions because of the curbs that have been placed in at the college, there is support for the measure. And in terms of building the campus community relations, I think this would be a great way to help encourage our student residents to be biking and cut down in parking, which of course has environmental impacts as well that we could all get behind. So, thank you.
Steve mentioned possible business being improved, some aspects in the business. And also, there's a possibility of better community when you have connecting sidewalks and people walk. You have more of a community kind of feel, which attracts people as well.
One other thing you might want to consider too is student retention of the bright students who might be considering staying here and becoming residents. Implementation of this vision might improve that.
I'd like to compliment Mary and Steve Reese. Both of them traveled to Rochester to get firsthand knowledge of complete streets by some experts in the field. Mary's talked to 2 engineering firms to look at what a complete streets project might look like in the village of Fredonia. I appreciate going above and beyond, to really look into this. But I think that this is a revenue base. It helps you build your community. It makes safer streets, safer for pedestrians. And I think everyone's aware that when you're trying to cross the street around here, you're kind of sometimes taking your life into your own hands. And we need to change that. We need to change the whole atmosphere and the whole attitude. So, thank you very much. Did anyone else have anything they'd like to say?
May I add?
Of course. Yes, Jim.
My name is Jim Perkin. My address is 307 Chestnut Street. Just the briefest of comments to support what's been said already. Fredonia, I think, in my experience, is unique because it's a very small village with very few what we might call streets, meaning Central Avenue, Temple, and Chestnut. So those streets are heavily used, more heavily, I suspect, than a village of this size would normally experience. And so anything that calms the traffic on those streets, it seems to me, is a wise move. And so I strongly support this.
I just had a question. Mary, when do you, the draft is almost complete as it is.
Right, there are people have been submitting things to
Right.
me, and it's
What's your
fluid draft.
what's your ballpark figure for it being finished and ready to be presented for
Could be
very soon?
within the week or so. I mean,
Oh.
there aren't that many changes that people have suggested to me, but I wanted to consult. I'll make some changes, send it to Lisa. She happens to be in Florida now.
We were talking earlier about attempting to include it in the comprehensive plan before it's fully adopted, so I was just wondering how.
Oh, it could be very soon. I'll see
Okay.
what Lisa says about some of the changes, because she's more the expert on it.
Okay,
Unfortunately,
thank you.
couldn't be here tonight.
Well, one of the trends right now is it's being looked at by the federal government and the state government.
Okay.
The federal government has over $1 billion right now in grants available for complete streets, calming streets. New York State has a $50 million grant out there, or you can write up to $50 million worth in grants. If DOT came through Main Street right now and we want them to make improvements on Main Street based on a comprehensive plan or a complete streets program, they wouldn't touch it like Mr. Gilman was saying, Dr. Gilman was saying. But if we had this in place when they came through Main Street,
Yep.
and we had
Yep.
recommendations, we could have the grants, we could have the recommendations put into place, and we
I
could
know
be
that
ready to
one.
roll. Any other
One-
comments, questions?
No, just, it's wonderful,
Right.
idea and everything else to go through. We tried to do a complete sidewalk grant at one point in time, but that didn't work, so. I
Some of
think-
these grants, the ones from New York State, if you write it correctly, and I'm not a grant writer, there's opportunity for
sidewalk.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. This had to deal with the schools, and so it just didn't quite mesh with.
Oh, well,
Yeah, I know.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And
Thank you.
we appreciate everyone's input and your support. Anybody else like to speak to the public portion of this meeting? Yes, sir. Mhm.
My name is Steve Forrester. My question is, I read in the paper a while ago that you guys are considering going above the 2% tax cap. Is that something that we're discussing now at this time, or is that something?
You certainly can.
Well, I just wanted to discuss my concerns with it, that's all.
Right.
My concerns are along the lines of how this has been planned out, as far as what you guys are looking at in regards to the amount of changes that you need to make, the things that you need to take into consideration that they're going above the tax cap. Like, what is driving that, I guess, is my first concern. I don't know if you can go into further detail. I know I work at a school district, and for us, we have the same issue with the tax cap.
Right.
And the tax cap is something that has really limited us a lot. And I know that payroll and stuff like that is a huge part of the school district.
Mhm.
And I just didn't know, as a village, what is driving this tax cap?
Well,
Or the consideration to go about it.
Right. I would bring up 2 points. One is, if the tax cap is in place, the 2% tax cap, and we don't pass a resolution to override the tax cap, if we do override it, we're penalized in a severe way. If we override it by accident, we think that the budget's going to fit in someplace, and for some reason that budget is still over the tax cap, we're penalized. I'm of the opinion that we should pass every budget year an override on the tax cap just to keep ourselves safe, okay? Right now, we're working diligently. This board met earlier tonight to go through the budget, and right now we're looking at every penny in the budget, trying to figure out what we can cut. And there's only so many things that you can cut. Then you have to look at revenue sources, then you have to look at fund balance, and as you're starting to take money out of fund balance, you're also walking through Death Valley. This 2% tax cap, sooner or later, there's a bubble that's blowing up and blowing up and blowing up, and it's going to explode sooner or later. Hopefully it's not going to be this year. I'm under the impression that we can make it under the 2% tax cap. My intention is to get under the tax cap, the 2% tax cap, and I know the whole board is working diligently to get under the basis, just to protect yourself in case there is an error or an unexpected expense that comes in. So.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I realize that everybody feels there's a real temptation if you've got this, potential that the fear is, or the inclination is to use it. And I think this is a very conservative board, and we recognize that that's a temptation we're not going to succumb to.
Yeah, my concerns are, I realize that our infrastructure, I live off homes. And,
I know where you live. Yeah.
Our infrastructure as a whole is deteriorating. It's an old infrastructure.
You've got the best street in the village right now.
I know. and it drives wonderful.
I know.
Except it doesn't have a bike lane.
But it will.
But not just you guys here, but long before you, I was in the service, and we did a lot of preventive maintenance. And I'm curious as if you guys feel like there was enough preventive maintenance done with these water lines, because they're popping up everywhere. And I see poor Jack trying to plug up every hole here and there. And, I'm concerned about that planning of, if we take care of it, like your vision of taking care of Holmes Place was just get it all out, and therefore it's going to be fixed. And we don't have to worry about Holmes Place, hopefully, for a long, long time. But the rest of the village is the same way. It seems like it is.
Right.
And so my concern is, the planning part of the preventive maintenance, when you talk about the tax cap, I'm concerned as a taxpayer because there's a lot of things that are negative about tax, going high with taxes, of course. We have a lot of houses that are up for sale just on our street alone. And I think it's hard for people to buy a house with high taxes, in our area. So, I'm just concerned about that.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, when we officially open the public hearing, we haven't done that yet. We're already talking about the when we
Right.
officially open the public hearing on the tax cap.
Right, well, yeah, this is, yeah, we could have done this under the public hearing, I understand what you're saying. And the public hearing's coming up next for the tax cap, the override.
Okay, well, that was my initial question, was this a good time
Right.
to talk about it now?
Yeah, in the open forum, you can discuss anything that's on the agenda, so, you're within your legal rights.
Oh, very good.
I think the problem that the village has, and historically, this village, and speaking for Mike even, especially for Mike, we've lived on an austerity budget forever. Have we set aside reserves? No. What we've done is lower taxes. And should we have been building up reserves to do infrastructure? Of course. When we built the water plant, should we have been setting aside money to repair the water plant? We should have. Did we? No. Sewer lines. Should we be building up a reserve so that we can just go in and do sewer lines? Should we have a reserve that we could just go into the next street right below yours and redo it the same way we did yours? Absolutely. When you're driving down your street and you see that the streets are up higher than the curbs, we've got a problem. And yet, staying under 2% tax cap isn't going to fix those problems. What we're doing right now is we're working with a Band-Aid, effort to keep everything under control. And at the same time, no one on this board has the intentions of raising taxes any more than we absolutely have to. So, I think we are all taxpayers here. We all live here. We all, suffer the same consequences that you're suffering. And we're going to do everything we can to make it as affordable to live here as possible. But with that being said, how about a public hearing? This being the time and place for the public hearing on proposed local law number 1 of 2014 entitled "A Local Law Authorizing a Property Tax Levy in Excess of the Limit Established in General Municipal Law number 3C for the Village of Fiscal Year commencing June 1st, 2014. Proof of publication shown. Mayor Key called the hearing to order." At this point, would anybody like to talk to the 2% tax cap? Could we re-record what was just said?
I'll edit it out.
No, your points are well taken.
Thank you. I just hope you guys, the board, just are planning appropriately and getting us so that as taxpayers for the community that
Right.
we know that our money is going towards, a valid, budget. Just it's not being wasted at all.
The budget reviews are open to the public. We meet half an hour, early every Monday night, so you're welcome to join us and see exactly what.
As you can see, item by item.
Yeah.
And like I said, I work in the school district, and I know we start planning in November, and so,
Right.
you know how that is too.
I know exactly
And
how that
so,
is.
I just hope that you guys are also taking those things into consideration.
Yeah, we used to start, March, as far as the budget, now we're starting in January, February, because of it.
Right. And it's getting more difficult every year. We thought after we got through the recession that life would, have a little bit of a shining star ahead of us. And then all of a sudden, a 2% tax cap was inherited. And I remember the first interview I had with Dave Raleigh. He said, "What are you going to do about the 2% tax cap?" And I said, "We'll make it." And then the second year, "What are you going to do about the tax cap?" "Oh, we'll make it." And then last week when I was talking to him, I said, "Dave, it's a tough one." Sooner or later this bubble is going to pop. And I think every municipality's feeling it, every school district's feeling it. And when inflation is going up at a certain rate, retirements are going up at a certain rate, healthcare is going up at certain rates, gas goes up at certain rates, you're pouring more salt than you can ever imagine, you're driving more trucks and driving overtime. Where does it stop? And yet, I'm optimistic that we're going to be under 2% this year. But next year, no guarantees. Would anybody else like to speak to the public hearing?
I would if I could have a moment.
Certainly.
Michael Sullivan. This is a year that is most important not to exceed that cap. And I would ask you not to pass a resolution giving yourself, or the local law giving yourselves the ability to do it. With the possibility of the governor's proposal
to give tax rebates to property taxpayers. The mayor talked about penalties if we exceed the cap and we don't have the local law, but there are also going to be a penalty on this community and every residential taxpayer if we do exceed that cap and the governor's budget is passed. The idea that we could lose that benefit, not just this year, but next year as well. And when you go to the governor's webpage and you see the plan is at 2 years. The other thing we have to remember, and it goes to the problem we've had over the last several years of cutting costs to keep under a cap or cutting costs just because we want to keep the costs down. At some point, the whole idea of the tax cap was to create the need and to push governments into more advanced shared services or regionalization and consolidation. And as much as we want to spend time talking about whether we should exceed the cap or not, we need to spend more time talking about those things so that we can find ways to continue enhanced services for our residents and share it on a bigger basis. So I asked you a two-step. Don't pass the local law. Don't give yourselves the temptation. Yes, you risk that penalty, but you also risk the penalty if you do exceed it of that tax rebate for 2 years. We won't have it a second year if we don't get it the first year. And second, I really implore you to start thoroughly examining the governor's proposals from when he was when he was the Attorney General and the governor now to get us to a point where we start looking at regionalization. Now the second year only requires shared services, doesn't require the big steps. But we do know that there's always the day that the carrot is going to be taken away and the hammer is going to follow. Please don't give yourselves that temptation of having this. Let this be the year that you know you've got to keep it under the cap to protect that tax cut for the residents.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the 2% public hearing? Anyone else? Oh.
Mary Jane Starks, Liberty Street, Fredonia. I would just like to voice my opinion in saying that I agree with Mr. Sullivan. I'm against going above the tax cap. I know you're saying it's for a safety net. Don't give yourself that safety net. Force yourselves to cut this budget, to make it under the cap. You've been working at it, chipping away at it. Keep doing that. Don't give yourself that potential opportunity to go above that cap. In the end, if you do, it could cost every taxpayer a rebate. And that's something we all need. The other thing is look at the businesses here. How many businesses are leaving this community because they can't afford to be here? How many homes do you have that are now in the market because people can't afford the prices of the taxes here? I know personally of 4 different families that wanted to move into the area. They could afford the home. They can't afford the taxes. Many people that I talk to tell me their tax payment for the village of Fredonia is higher in some instances than their mortgage payments. We're paying, I believe it's 33.57%. We are almost double the next village closest to some taxes. It's gotta stop. Don't raise the tax cap.
Anyone else like to address the public hearing? Yes, Mr. Linden.
James Linden. One question about I realize the tax cap addresses the budget itself, but I realize there's also pensions that are involved that are exempt to the tax cap. So if there's, I don't know how much the pension costs have exceeded that possibility above the tax cap, and that would be added to the cost of the tax increase.
You mean the pensions for the employees?
Pensions fund, yes, employee pension funds, correct.
That's within the tax cap. I mean,
We are within the tax cap on that?
right, yeah. We have to stay under the tax cap.
The tentative budget, the tentative budget has that under the also within the tax cap? Because I mean.
There's no special tax cap.
There's an exemption
for the
according to
pension.
state law, am I correct on that, Mike?
I think there was. Isn't the pension is excluded from the figure when you calculate your cap?
No, there's a certain calculation of a percent of the increase in the pension. That's
right. So
that's
the increases is covered.
Yeah, it's the increase,
Right,
a percent of that increase that
Correct.
becomes.
And that's why I was just wondering if is that going to be an issue with us this year? And would that, so that people know that that's a possibility, the tax, even if you're under the tax cap, that may still be, people will be wondering why it's over the top of it, because there could be possibly an exemption for something like that. Not
That's-
that I'm asking you to do it, what I'm saying is that if you could prevent, I would prefer you to stay under it. And it,
Mm.
but, because of employee costs, and if we could find ways to keep the cost of employees down so the pensions don't keep compounding over the years, so at some point down the road, pension costs are gonna be actually unaffordable. So if we could wages and the public employees are paid, that would be a way to address that for down the road, but also in the near future too. I hope that, keep that in mind.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Resolutions.
Be resolved, the mayor is hereby authorized to call for a roll call vote for all resolutions presented to this board for action.
Second.
I'll call a roll call vote then. Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Mr. Siri.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. McKay.
Yes.
Okay. That's passed.
Be resolved, the training request for John Sullivan, Keith Stock, Larry Barton, Amelia McKnight, John Lamper, Charles Ortolano, Jen Merrill, Kurt Madem, Fredonia volunteer firefighters to travel out of the county to attend a fire department, fire and EMS law and management conference hosted by Pinsky Law Group, March 28th to 30th, 2014. No cost to the village of Fredonia, hereby approved.
Second.
Mr. Ruckman. Mr. Siri.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Yes.
Mrs. McKay.
Yes.
Okay, it's passed.
Whereas the Fredonia Village Board has reviewed the application of police officer Mike Naparella, dated March 2nd, 2014, request benefits for general municipal law, section 207C, for an incident which occurred on March 2nd, 2014. Now therefore be resolved that after review of the claim, this board determines that the police officer Mike Naparella did incur a performance duty injury within the meaning of the section 207 of the general municipal law, and therefore the claim is hereby granted.
Second.
Mr. Ruckman.
Aye.
Mr. Siri.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Aye.
Mrs. McKay.
Aye.
Passed.
Be it resolved that a special meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia will be held on Monday, March 17th, 2014 at 7:30 p.m. to present the tentative village budget and to call for a public hearing on said judgment to be held on April 7th, 2014, and to consider any other matters that may come before the board.
Second.
Mr. Ruckman.
Aye.
Mr. Siri.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Aye.
Mrs. McKay.
Yes.
Passed.
Be it resolved that O'Brien and Gear Engineering of Syracuse, New York, be retained for engineering services for the backflow preventer installation design of the filter surface wash water supply at the water treatment plant at a cost not to exceed $7,700 per their proposal dated January 2nd, 2014. The mayor is hereby authorized to sign a letter of agreement to this effect on behalf of the Village of Fredonia.
Second.
Mr. Ruckman.
Aye.
Mr. Siri.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Aye.
Mrs. McKay.
Aye.
It's passed.
Whereas the Village of Fredonia Village and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Corps, entered into an agreement dated March 30th, 2009, whereby the Corps will construct a stream bank erosion control project along Canadaway Creek in the town of Dunkirk to protect the village sewer main. And whereas the Corps has completed the design of the project and environmental assessments and has informed the village it is ready to go forward with bidding process. And whereas the project is to be constructed on lands owned by the village, and whereas the estimated total project cost is $919,400, and whereas the Corps is to pay the first $40,000 of the project plus 65% of the remaining cost of the project, and the village pay 35% of the balance of the cost of the project. Whereas the district commander of the Corps, by letter dated February 28, 2014, has informed the village that the total construction cost share of 35% for the village is estimated at $308,000, and has requested that the sum of $300,000 be forwarded at this time to the Corps so that the contract solicitation may be started. And whereas the village board has passed the necessary bonding authorization to pay for its share of the cost of the project, now therefore be it resolved that the village administrator is hereby authorized to transmit to the Corps the sum of $300,000 as requested in the February 28, 2014 letter from the district commander of the Corps, Lieutenant Bodine.
Second.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Siri. Were you involved in that original grant?
Actually, it was Frank Pagano, but then I finished it off for him.
Right. How do you feel about this? It's been going on since 1999. And finally it might be taking
15
place.
years later.
And,
Right.
yay. And Mr. Siri pounded on many doors, including Brian Higgins, to get this going and some money for us.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Siri. We appreciate your hard
It
work.
was a joint effort from everyone.
Okay, let's go for the vote. Mr. Ruckman?
Aye.
Mr. Siri?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
It's passed. Thank you. Is there anything else anyone would like to bring up at this time?
Two things. Jack, did I notice there's new signs up on Central Avenue, speaking of Central Avenue and safe streets for the crosswalks? Did you just put those up? It's like recent?
They've actually been there since.
I just wanted to see what he was saying, so, because they were stopping today, actually, first time I noticed. Yeah, they were stopping for pedestrians in the crosswalk finally, on Central Avenue, so.
That calming effect that complete
When the
streets.
weather does improve, I'll put the mid-street sign back up again, and hopefully they won't steal it this time.
Right.
We're gonna meet at 6 o'clock next Monday, for the budget, with the fire department, hopefully.
Anything else for the good of the order? I would like to say that, I don't know if you're all aware of it, Mrs. Harper, Mrs. Joy Harper from the library is retiring. I invited her to come over to say goodbye to the board. She says, I'm kind of quiet in nature. I'd like to just...
Keep it that way.
Old librarians like to sneak away, you know. But she's not that old. She's a vibrant part of our community, and I'd like to wish her well and thank her for all of her hard work. But if there's nothing else, do I hear a motion, Mrs. Jones?
Motion to adjourn?
Second that motion, adjourn.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.